So my name is Marion Brown. I am many things. The most important things in my life are being a wife, a mother, a grandmother. Um, but I wear many different hats. Uh, I'm a governance consultant. I'm a film producer, director. Um, I studied to be a family therapist. Um, but the most important roles in my life are my relationships and the quality of my relationships. And I have been truly blessed with some, incredible people in my life, including, giving birth to my daughter, my best friend, my business partner, my fellow host of our podcast. And yeah, I was diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension 7 years ago, and sadly, it's not a rare disease in my family. My sister died from it 12 years ago now, 11 years ago.
12.
Yeah, 12 years ago. And she lasted 2 years after her diagnosis. So when I was diagnosed 7 years ago, I kind of just planned out the end of my life because hers came so quick. Um, but in the midst of all of that, they've come up with a number of different medications. So, my journey has been quite different than hers. But before I continue, I'll let Danielle introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Danielle Wilson Brown, and I am Marion's daughter, best friend, business partner, and we have a very unique and complex relationship. I am honored to join this conversation today. I'm very humbled by the feedback that we've received about this podcast because it started out as a conversation between my mom and I. It started out with what is MAID and what is medical assistance in dying in our Indigenous communities. And it grew to these amazing conversations with these incredibly impressive people. And we learned so much. And like I said, I was humbled by the vulnerability and the trust that people put in us in this platform, in this podcast. Because like I said, it started out as a very personal journey. My mom is sick. Pulmonary hypertension is going to take her from me. And it started out as a conversation. Pulmonary hypertension has taken so many choices away from my mom. But the choice that she made in choosing MAID, we wanted to help people start these conversations because death and dying, they're incredibly hard conversations to have with family members. And we've had numerous friends and family tell us that they liked how our family communicated. So we thought, let's try a bigger platform then. Let's try sharing it with the world. And you never know what's going to happen when you share your life with complete strangers. There's a daunting feeling, being so open, honest, and vulnerable with the world. But yeah, I was really surprised, I guess, because it's a very heavy subject. And the things that we discuss and face are difficult to hear, are difficult to process. But we appreciate people willing to listen and learn and evolve. And we've received amazing feedback, and I'm so grateful for that. But before I go on, I just wanted to acknowledge that I am coming to you in this conversation from the Coast Salish territories, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam peoples, and I really appreciate, these lands that we've been able to work on and develop, all of these different storytelling platforms. So thank you so much. I know that was a super long intro.
No, that's great. And it really sort of rolls into that next question I had. And, listening to the podcast, when I started, I feel like I've been through a journey just listening to your podcast, because in the beginning, you were definitely setting the stage for a very personal story, your story as your family. But the journey I feel like I've been on, and probably other listeners have been on, is the journey of, so many people, like you said, so many people have been so vulnerable, which is truly amazing. Why do you think that is? I mean, obviously you've come to it from a really personal story journey, but I think every single person that you've had on the podcast has shared personal stories from their own lives, their own experiences, and their own vulnerabilities, coming to the conversation, not just about MAID, but so much about the topic and about what their own dealings in their own lives. Why do you think that it's resonated on that personal level for so many people?
Well, I think the question of, what do you want to say before I go? And it evolved to the point where we needed to address the systemic issues first. We needed our listeners, our community, to understand that the issues that we're facing in the medical community as patients, as caregivers, what we go through isn't a unique experience. The systemic racism, the institutional racism, we are still being impacted from it. And we needed people to understand that it's not just us, it's not just our community, it's not just our family, it is still happening. And so one comment that we received is like, well, not all your episodes are about MAID. Well, it's because our sense of choice, our sense of agency is still being impacted by generational trauma. And we needed to address every single issue that our families, our communities are still dealing with. Because those beliefs, that racism, impacts our sense of agency. It impacts our sense of choice. And the consensus of MAID from a couple of years ago said over 90% of people who chose MAID were Caucasian. And we were like, why is that? Because they have more sense of agency, more sense of choice. But yeah, it was a very broad question that opened up so many avenues of discussion that we were also surprised by. But we thought it very important to address and discuss with various experts. And wow, they were impressive. The work that they've done, the issues that they've addressed, the policies that they're creating, the work that we're doing to address the issues and evolve have, like I said, they humbled me. Those discussions with these impressive women, and we're just so grateful for their perspectives, their expertise.
You know, I have to add to that, Danielle. I echo everything Danielle has said, that we've just been absolutely blessed to have these incredible people come and have that conversation with us. And the question you ask is, why do you think people were as vulnerable as they were? I think we set the stage for that. Because, the thing we ask of both of us before each podcast is that we be truly authentic. We talk about the fears and even the fights that we've had, or, just everyday things. It's not curated at all. These are authentic conversations that, we just go in and we treat it like a conversation. So when we have somebody as a guest, I go in curious. And, more often than not, people are looking for ways to connect with other people. We've come from such a disconnected society now that in any way that we are able to connect, I think is important. And this one is incredibly important. This whole conversation around MAID, pardon me, one of the big things is Indigenous people have ceremony around death and dying. We do it really well. And I know that sounds strange to say, but we have a means of connecting. We have roles, we have responsibilities, and that helps. Because for many, even just talking about death and dying is taboo. It's too scary a thought, so we don't talk about it. But I remember looking after my mother when she was at the tail end of her battle with cancer. And she was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer, and she was at the end of her journey, and the doctors had told us there was nothing else they could do. And she wanted to talk about her funeral. I just sat there with tears in my eyes, shaking my head. No, we're not there yet, no. And she said, our belief is that if you plan for it, it staves it off. And there's comfort in that. Like, all right, we're going to sit down and we'll talk about this thing. And with tears in my eyes and a very snot-laden conversation, we planned her funeral. And that gave her comfort. Part of what we talked about in our podcast is that we are people of the buffalo. People of the buffaloes, they stand on a plain, and when they see the storm coming, everybody else runs away from the storm. People of the buffalo stand and face it. And sometimes they even run through it, and it's over faster. So as a family, we have collectively stood and faced every issue. And we'd even run to it. We'd learn about it. We'd educate ourselves and deal with the issues that we have. I think that allowed for some incredible conversations. And more often than not, if you hold space for it and people feel safe, they'll come and have those authentic conversations with you.
We've also been told that we have those faces that they just tell all their stories to. I think it helps that we're trained therapists.
Yeah, and as I had said, I listen. I don't watch the podcast. I listen, and I do find both of your voices bring a really sort of calming vibe to the podcast. But the interesting thing, I think, how I've interpreted a lot of the conversations while you're addressing MAID and death, so much of it is about life. and the journey that we're all on through our lives. And so that is how I see so much of the stories, sort of the community, the life, and looking at the healing through the sharing of stories. How you've already mentioned a little bit about how it's been received, but how's the podcast been received by family, by community, sort of the larger audience in terms of the stories, the content, and talking about your personal journey?
I think it was interesting. We went to a conference last month, and it was for a lot of medical professionals. So doctors and nurses, board members of nonprofits would come up and talk to us like they knew us. And it was so weird because I'm like, oh man, do I have a really bad memory? Do I not remember meeting this person? And then they would go on to say, yeah, I've listened to every one of your episodes. And it was surreal how open they were to talking about it and how appreciative they were for the platform. And, because when we started this, like I said, it's a difficult topic and it can be received as controversial. And so I was almost bracing myself for negative feedback, even attacks, even racist comments. Like, that's when I thought about the future and how this was going to be received. It was mixed. It was, I am sharing my family with the world, and I have no idea what's going to happen. But we've been incredibly blessed. So many people have, come back with a comment of, this is a sacred journey. And I'm incredibly grateful for, those comments, that feedback, that, these messages are being received in such a good way.
I have to say, there's a lot of our family and friends who don't listen. And they're not ready for it yet. Because we're talking about my death. I have a best friend in the world who can't. And I've known her since I was 18 years old, but she cannot listen to it. It doesn't mean she's hiding from it. But I think what it offers is a conversation that's ready when you are. And so, we haven't gotten a lot of feedback, and our family, sadly, our family is really good at dealing with death. We're in the midst of burying my brother right now. I don't know if they feel like they need to have the conversation. But when it comes to MAID, much like Danielle, I expected a little bit of pushback. But I have nothing but support, because even when I brought up the conversation with my family, and I went to all of my children and all of my family members, I received nothing but support. And even my 90-year-old father was going, I would make the same choice. And so I think part of what that does is it shows sort of this evolution in us being able to have difficult conversations. And that's kind of what we wanted. That's kind of what we wanted from this podcast, is the ability to have difficult conversations. That includes all the isms Danielle had just mentioned: racism, medical racism, environmental racism, all of them. Being able to talk about it. Being able to talk about, why are my people not being offered MAID? Why are my people not, asking for MAID? Is an important conversation to start. And I've raised a number of children I've had a lot of really difficult conversations. And I think I'm pretty good at it. And so being able to have this podcast that'll just hold space for other people and their beliefs. Because, you know, what I would like to do is even have a little bit of pushback from this, in this space, in this forum. Somebody to say, you know, that we can work through a process with. Because that's what my family has done forever. You know, like I said, the whole reason we started this is because these were just conversations we were having anyways. Let's make a podcast out of it. And maybe somebody else might find it interesting. We've been very fortunate that we've had the support of many, many people. We've had a lot of people hold up our family. We didn't just end up like this, with a family that's able to communicate, to talk about every difficult thing that comes up. It happened with intention. And that's how we need to deal with many of these steps in our life, is to do it intentionally. Know who you are. Know, you know, let people know who you are and how you made the choices you made. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to MAID, yeah, like I said, I watched my sister and the many things that pulmonary hypertension took away from her until her life was over. So I made the choice. When there is nothing else they can do for me medically, I get to decide. And I get to decide with all of the love and support of my family. How amazing is that?
Truly amazing. Now, Danielle, how difficult was that for you? So much of the conversations that we often hear, you know, in our community is it can be challenging for family. Ultimately, the decision made is often for people about autonomy and having that choice. So how difficult was it for you to hear that that was the choice? Or maybe not at all.
There was an automatic rejection. You know, my brain told me no. There's no way I know how to live in a world without my mom. You know, because like I said, we have a very unique relationship. We're not just mother-daughter. We grew this friendship through this emotional roller coaster that we call life. And it was incredibly difficult to hear her decision because my brain and my heart want to protect me and say, no, I'm not going to lose my mom. I'm not going to live in a world without my mom. But this choice is about her. This choice is about letting her choose what happens at the end. Because I saw what happened to my aunt. I saw what happened to my uncle. I saw what happened to my family members when their body betrays them so much that the quality of life is non-existent. And I love her enough to not want her to suffer. So my choice wasn't really a choice. It was shifting my perspective. I love her enough to let her go. I love my family enough to let them go. Because for us, death isn't an ending. When we lost my uncle, yeah, we mourn for ourselves. We mourn for us as a family because we're the ones left behind. But our beliefs, he gets to be with my grandmother. He gets to be with my aunt. He gets to be with every single family member we've lost. And so this, in the spirit world, he's celebrating. My family is celebrating. Even in science, energy can't be created or destroyed. So where does that spirit go? And these existential conversations are scary. They're daunting. Sometimes they can't fit in your brain. But our beliefs, our ceremonies, our traditions, they give us comfort. So yeah, when we get to the point where my mom's condition is so detrimental to her body, I will honor her decision. I will honor her choice, because she'll just be gone from this realm. But I'll see her again.